Good evening, everyone. I know it's so exciting to be here. It really is. It really is. Thank you so much for joining us, both in person here and also by Zoom. I'm Kate Markert. I'm the executive director here at Hillwood Estate Museum and Gardens, and we're in Washington, D.C. I'm so happy. I need to say that now for our Zoom audience. My prepositions are she and her. And as we begin, as I always do, I like to take a moment to gratefully acknowledge the Nacotch tank, also documented as the Anacostan, the Piscataway, and the Pamunkey. And these, of course, are the native peoples on whose lands Hillwood stands, as well as the diverse native communities who make their homes near us today. We are so pleased to have audiences joining us for tonight's program, both here and by Zoom. And for those of you who are in the theater, I think you probably know what I'm going to say. Make sure that your phones are off, that we don't have any chirping or barking or whatever. And of course, those of you who are joining us by Zoom, you all can make yourselves comfortable. I know you don't have shoes on anyway, but you can make yourselves comfortable because your cameras and your microphones are not active, but you can submit questions using the Q&A module at any time during the program as they cross your mind, and we'll get to as many questions afterwards, and I'm sure there will be a lot, from both locations at the end. So for those of you who are in the theater who will have questions at the end, wait until the microphone comes around to you so that the people on Zoom can hear your question. So many of you know that we close for several weeks in January. So February is always a very fresh start for us. And everything, I hope you've had a chance to go into the mansion because everything looks completely spectacular and sparkling after. I'm sure you all do this at home too. You're cleaning top to bottom. And we are also, we're greeted with fantastic programs beginning in February. On February 17th, our new exhibition, Marjorie Merriweather Post Paris, will open to the public. Some of you may have tickets to our Valentine event, so you'll get to see it a little earlier. But it really allows you to see the City of Light through Marjorie Merriweather Post's eyes. You will not want to miss this exhibition, I'm here to tell you. So tonight begins our month-long Great Homes and Gardens series. Now, next week on February 15th, Marta McDowell and Larry Letterman will discuss their book, The DuPont Gardens of the Brandywine, and I think a lot of you know them. And yes, and they have fabulous visuals. Of course, we're known for our fabulous visuals, so you'll have some tonight too. But then on February 22nd, the authors of Afro Chic, Janine Hayes and Brian Mason, will join me for a conversation, really unpacking the historical content, aesthetics, and role of identity and cultural preservation through the Black family home. And that is all covered in their really fascinating book, Afro Chic, which of course is upstairs. And then ending the series on February 27th will be Victoria Kastner, who's presenting her book about the life of the trailblazing architect Julia Morgan. And you know Julia Morgan was responsible for Hearst Castle. So that is going to be an absolutely fascinating program also. Now tonight, I know we are very excited to hear from Nick McCullough, who, yes. So Nick kicks off the Great Homes and Gardens lecture series with a deep dive into his book, American Roots, Lessons and Inspiration from the Designers Reimagining Our Home Gardens. So you can join us for a book signing after the lecture. We are, of course, selling the books upstairs, and it will take place right outside the theater. He's an award-winning garden designer and has developed a distinctive style that he calls Midwestern Modern. Yes, one that relies on the balance of natural paving and innovative perennial plantings. So he's based in Ohio, and I know many of you know that because many of you met him upstairs. And he and his team at McCullough's Landscape and Nursery create and maintain plant-centric gardens and in and around the Midwest that are both ecologically sensitive and family forward. I cannot wait to hear about that. His first book is American Roots, and it was co-authored with his wife Allison and Teresa Woodard, and it has just been recently published by Timber Press, and we will have the pleasure of hearing about it tonight. So please join me in welcoming Nick McCullough to the podium.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate everyone coming out on a Tuesday evening in February. It doesn't feel like February, so thank you for that. I will say back home it was 65 degrees today, so I think we're all getting a little bit of a taste of spring. But my grandfather always says, you're going to get it at some point. So it means it'll be snowing on Easter or in April. So expect that. Well, thank you so much. So the staff here, the amazing facilities, you guys are so lucky to have Hillwood close to home, if you are close to home. And if you're online, you have to get here and visit it if you haven't. Thank you so much for bringing me in. I really appreciate it. Tonight, we're going to dive into a little bit about the book, but a little bit about me. I studied garden design at Ohio State University. I'm very fortunate. I'm a proud Midwesterner, but at the same time, I was very fortunate to study garden design in Northwest England. And so I spent the summer traversing the Lake District and bouncing from estate to estate. And so it was a work-study program that really changed my life. And from that, I really garnered this plant-centric or very perennial-forward design. And my wife, Allison, was a co-author on this book as well, and she couldn't be here tonight. Our kids play hockey. It is the end of the season. She is full-on in mom duties. So we're going to talk a little bit about us and our company and what we do. We're going to talk about what defines the American garden and then the common threads we saw throughout the book. So Columbus, Ohio, if you guys don't know, Columbus, Ohio is a very unique place in the Midwest. It is the third largest retail center outside of New York and LA. Most people don't realize that. And the reason that is because of its proximity to over 50% of the U.S. population. We're within an 8-hour drive or 1-hour flight of most of the population in the U.S. And so because of that, we have some really amazing, unique homes, very Georgian focus as well. This is one of our clients' backyards as well. And so because of that, we get clientele who move in from all over the world. They came in from Prada, they came in from Gucci, or whoever they came from London, from LA. And so we have a clientele that really has a high level of taste. They also can afford to have a much larger home. You think about what you get for a few $1 million in LA versus what you get in the Midwest. The cost of living is a lot lower. It is changing very quickly, though. Intel is building the largest microchip plant in the world 3 miles from my shop, and that is operational in 2025. And so it's really changing the landscape very, very quickly. So we're in a good position. It's good for business. And so our company is McCullough's Landscape and Nursery, and our goal is to create exceptional landscaping for extraordinary properties. And we're very fortunate to have beautiful homes that are the backdrop to our gardens, or vice versa. I think the garden is first, but so really our company is really, design is a very small portion of it. We think fine gardening is a really crucial part in what we do. Without the fine gardeners here, the staff taking care of these gardens, we wouldn't be able to appreciate that. So our goal is to maintain and grow these gardens to their fullest potential. So we employ a wonderful staff of horticulturalists, and I'm very fortunate to work on homes and I have clients who let me flex my creative muscle. And that is not always the case. And so I'm very fortunate to have clients who just give me a quick, like, let's do this. I dream it up, and then we install it and then maintain it. And so I get into every little kind of detail, from small water features to, and actually this is a water feature here that doubles as a hot tub. A little insight: we couldn't have a pool in this area, but we could have a hot tub or water feature that is less than 3 feet deep. So so there you go. A little insight there. But we also get into many different design styles. I will say I love perennial design, but we really love designing with the structure of the garden, the hedging, and those sorts of things. But one of my favorite things to do is design is container gardens. And so we really push the envelope on container garden design. And it's what actually brings a lot of clients into our company. So we push the envelope of tone-on-tone monochromatic plantings and really making things that you haven't seen before. That's very important to what we do. I've been very fortunate to travel much of the world to visit gardens. Certainly plants have taken me a long way, and so I gain these inspirations through travel. And this is an example of a garden, a parterre garden that we planted in Columbus, Ohio. So Columbus is a great commuter city as well. This client worked in Chicago, came home on the weekends about every third weekend of the month, and we always had to have the garden ready for them at any notice. Well, no notice. How about that? So they just sold it last year, and they're full time in Florida now. So that's a little sad. But our goal too is to sustain through plant diversity. So certainly sustainability is a hot topic. It's certainly been around, and I think gardeners are the first and foremost on the forefront of sustainability. We get a chance to really affect our biodiversity. And so our goal is to really sustain through plant diversity. So we have our own nursery. We are not open to the public. These are only plants that are grown for our own projects, our own, that go out to our own clientele. It's our own plant palette. And so I'm a plant nerd, self-proclaimed, but it's true. I read magazines. I read car magazines every now and then, but I read mainly magazines about plants. And so I've been very fortunate to be with Pete Udolph. If you guys know Pete Udolph, designed the Highline Laurie Garden in Chicago, in his garden in Humelo, in the Netherlands. And so when I go there, I take notes and I come back and I buy plants. And so that's where our nursery has really come from. But it's amazing when you go to Europe, what they're growing are U.S. native perennials. And so it's like the college student that went to Europe to get cultured and comes back and it's cool again, right? Oh, we think we're cool. But these perennials came from the Midwestern prairie. They're things that grow here automatically anyways, and they're things that should be planted in our gardens. And so our goal is to create these plant-centric designs through using U.S. natives, not solely, but really as a great backbone of what we do, because they're so beautiful. They have so much character, and honestly, they do very well in our soils. This was an example of a garden that we did this summer. I use a lot of gravels. To me, walking on a crunchy gravel with a tree canopy overhead, there's nothing better. And it's really wherever the imagination could take you. This client loves Nantucket, and so they were fascinated with the roses growing over the cottages out on the beach. And so this was the inspiration behind this. And this is the patio here where they dine on crushed gravel in the parterre garden. And the great thing is it's permeable. Water's not running off. It soaks in. These root zones are creating the matrix underground. And so we're very fortunate to really push the envelope for design. This is in the Midwest. This is an American garden. Certainly, buying plants is one of my passions. I love sourcing plant material, but we also grow a lot of it as well. So we need to always have the unique plants that really push the envelope. So these are espalier, candelabra apple trees here. They're Granny Smith apples, and then flat hornbeams that we're training to go out to a client. And this is the photo of those Granny Smith apples in the ground. So it's hard to tell, but the top of those are at 11 feet tall. They're trained up. And so that was the same client that commuted in from Chicago on the weekends. And so when we would come over, to start some gardening, she would come out with a apple crumble for us every now and then. So you definitely reap what you sow, right? And but really, sourcing plants is a big part of what we do. And it became very difficult to source the right plant material, so I just decided to grow them. And so we have a nursery where we grow our own plant materials. So these are upright European hornbeams. We train them in hedges, and we train them in the field. And so, in a number of occasions, we've dug them. They're in the ground by 2:00 in the afternoon that same day. So we're very fortunate to have the resources and the space. Honestly, the Midwest, we have space as opposed to here. So we're very fortunate. And so on another note, our container gardening is being a big thing of what we do. For the winter container, we love using cut stems and winter berries. And so there's a picture of me harvesting the winter berries. The winter berry is actually a Midwest native. It's a U.S. native. And so we're like, let's not force the issue and let's grow what works here. And so we have a company in which basically we harvest the top of whatever's in the ground. So we have peonies, we have red twig dogwoods, we have curly willows, and we have winter berries. And so basically the root stock the next year grows on and the plant stays in the ground, and we're not harvesting the soil away from our farm. And so on that note, container gardening is a really big part of what we do. So we push an envelope of texture and design. I love designing more with texture than I do with color. And so you'll see here this monochromatic planting. These planters are from Country Casual Teak, a fantastic company here in the greater DC area. And you can see the scale in which they are. And here's Allison, my wife, for scale. So she's not very, very tiny. It's just the containers are very, very big. And so this was a fall planting that we did. And so Allison had the idea of growing okra. And so we grew okra, which is loves the summer heat, loves it. So these are cut off stems that are shoved in the pot for the winter time, along with a couple native grasses and native heuchera as well. And so those stayed in the entire winter. They just dried on, and they looked fantastic come spring. I actually didn't want to pull them out come springtime, but there's a time and a place. So we're going to talk about defining the American garden and really what set us on this path of writing a book. And so really the seed was planted. I've been speaking across the country for a number of years. I've been very fortunate to speak in the DC area here with the Association of Professional Landscape Designer chapter. It's a fantastic group, and 3 of my friends are here in the second row tonight. Really that is where all my inspiration comes from. I love traveling. I think traveling is one of the best educations you can get. And so I have a really good friend, Dan Benarsik, who is one of the head gardeners at Chanticleer Gardens. Anyone been to Chanticleer Gardens? I think it's one of the best gardens in the world, hands down. And I mean the world, not just America, in the world. And so I've been very fortunate. I stayed at Dan and Peggy Ann's house, and they're in the book here as well. And so I was one of the gardeners at the Philadelphia Flower Show, the guest gardener. So they brought me in to design a show garden. And so while I was doing that, I stayed at Dan and Peggy Ann's house. And so I got to spend time in this intimate space, a designer space, where they're not, they don't have to answer to a client. They can break every rule. They can put, plants that they pull out of a client's house that they bring back to their own garden. And so it's such a unique place that it's like being inside an artist studio, right? And so Dan was one of these first inspirations of just using found items, of using things that he found at the side of the road in the junkyard. And, this is a culvert, pipe here that he found, planted it with hens and chicks, and he put a glass top on it. It's really unbelievable, this inspiration that I was finding in their gardens. And so that's where this kind of whole inside of these stories need to be told. This garden hasn't been published. It's not an estate that everyone visits. It's not a place where the public can see. And this is the American garden. This is the fabric of the American garden. And so from plant combinations to I will say I do enjoy a cocktail in the garden every time I visit with somebody. I am known to enjoy a gin and tonic every now and then. And so that was really the inspiration on what we do. And so we assembled a team. COVID hit, right? It hit us hard. I was speaking in Kansas City, and as the country was shutting down, like I was literally thinking, I'm not going to get home. I think I have to rent a car and drive home. And so the best thing that happened to us gardeners was shut down, spend 2 weeks in your own garden. I'm like, yeah, it's great. It was our sanctuary. It's where we love to, express ourselves. And so to me, COVID was such a mixed blessing, right? Yes, I'm sorry for all the people who got sick. However, it made us slow down. It made us reevaluate what was important and what was going on. So Teresa had written a couple articles about us in Better Homes and Garden, Midwest Living. And so she lives in Columbus as well. And we're like, Teresa, come over. So we sat 20 feet away from each other on our back patio, had a cocktail, and said, hey, we have this idea. And so we were fortunate. Timber Press had said, when you have an idea for a book, pitch it to us and let's get going. So we pitched it, and we were on our way. And so that was January of 2021. We got our book deal. So the backbone of our book is it's the story of the gardener. It's not just the garden, right? It's killer images to rival Gardens Illustrated, which to me is the best gardening magazine in the world, and I call garden porn. It certainly is, unbelievable. And then tangible learnings, where you could take away those things, because I hate reading House Beautiful or Vogue, and you read an article about a garden, and there's no information about the plant. There's no information about who designed it. There's no information about the struggles and that they went through to create it. So we really wanted to dive deep into that. So that's why there's only 20 gardens in our book. This could have been this could be a 10-volume series, right? Let's be honest. There are people in this room, their gardens should be in this book, but it was a moment in time. So one thing that was very important to me was to capture these images myself. So I shot the book. All but 3 gardens, I believe it's 3 gardens in the book, I photographed myself. I was a good enough photographer by the end. I would say I was a pretty good photographer. And so we crisscrossed across the country over the summer of 2021. We shot the book from Memorial Day to Labor Day. We visited all these sites, and could we do it again? No, because it was COVID. People weren't traveling. I could book a ticket to Austin, Texas on a Tuesday and be there on Wednesday, and it cost me $180, right? I mean, you can't do that now. And so I guess we were brave enough to do it, and it was honestly one of the best summers of our lives. Our kids went with us on a number of these places, and American Roots was born. So the key thing to this is these are not garden designers' homes. I mean, only a couple of them are by trade garden designers. These are people who are former fashion executives. These are creatives. These are people who flex their muscle through their garden, right? People who are interior designers, people who are florists, people who are YouTube influencers. So it was important to us that it was more than just garden designers. So we found some pretty amazing things, these common threads that existed throughout the entire visiting all these gardens. And these common threads aren't in the book, so these are the special takeaway home tonight. So gravel gardens, if you want to do what the cool kids are doing out there, gravel gardens is it. And so this is really the trend that is really going to be, well, it's not a trend. It's what is sustainable, and it's what these amazing gardeners are doing. Jeff Epping is in Madison, Wisconsin. And if anybody has been to Madison, University of Wisconsin there, it's a fantastic town. It's an unbelievable town. And so in Jeff's front yard is this gravel matrix garden. This is all gravel. He dug it out. His neighbors were probably cursing his name, just not knowing what he was doing, right? And so this is planted in the Beth Chatto style of garden design. Beth Chatto was an innovator in garden design in England. And so the premise is that the perennials are down, their roots are down in the subsoil. And then there's a layer of gravel that comes up around the crown of the perennial itself. And on that notion, then weeds can't get started. These perennials are completely adapt to deal with any drought conditions, no rain, very little water. And so in this case, the water percolates down, weed seeds can't germinate, and it is a very sustainable way of gardening. You don't have to mulch. We don't have to do any of those things. And look at the results that Jeff was able to get from this front yard garden. This is an anywhere suburban neighborhood. This is anybody could do this. But in a lot of cases, HOAs won't let us do this sort of design. And you can see just this meandering path. The whole goal is to slow down and stop and look and be involved in the garden and not just look at it from afar. And I will say his back garden that is not a gravel garden is pretty spectacular as well. So Sean Conway had a show on PBS for a number of years called Cultivating Life. And so Sean is in Tiverton, Rhode Island. If you guys have ever been there, it's really a spectacular place. It's just outside Newport. And so Sean has his was a change of pace in life. And so his kids had grown up. He kind of really changed his business model, what he was doing. And so he created this gravel garden that was a formal English perennial garden. Very intense, lots of deadheading, lots of cutting back, lots of very intense gardening. And his life had changed. He didn't have time for that. So when we shot this was 9 months old. One thing that he saw there in Rhode Island are these tidal swales, a consistent flooding every year. And so this allowed him to have a garden that was really beautiful and really textural. But what Sean had were these beautiful chess pieces, I call chess pieces throughout the garden. The bones of the garden were very good, right? These are columnar upright European horn beams, and just look how perfect those cylinders are. So really what he did was he was editing his garden. You can see how this tapestry of soft and these really Mediterranean style plants really take very little input and have maximum output. And you can see in the background here the purple beech hedge and how beautiful that is with these tone on tone, this really silver blue texture as it comes across here. Brant and Chelsea, they're in Portland, Oregon, and they're an interior designer / engineer dynamic duo. And I will say, they have the best Airbnb I've ever stayed in my life. So if you're in Portland, shoot me up, DM me on Instagram, and it is the most beautiful little Airbnb. And that's the front door to it right there. That window is the front door, actually. And so you look, they took away their sidewalk, and it's crushed gravel. These beautiful silver oaks are planted into this strip, and so it slows you down. It absorbs water. When they do have water, they have quite a bit of it, and so you can see how this really transitioned from a hell strip to really blending the whole garden all the way out to the street, and you can see how gorgeous that is. Keep in mind, they're not plant first. They are interior designers. They're looking at it from a very different perspective I am. But they're really coming up with a beautiful, beautiful product in the end. The time between the paving here, it's gorgeous. It also serves many functions of keeping everything tidy, of soaking up rainwater. And I do love this tone on tone and black on black house kind of. And you just see how beautiful it is with the lavender and the artemisia that's planted in the front here. And while I was shooting the garden, I had a helper who tracked me everywhere I went, stalked me all around the garden. And that's a GPS collar there that he has on, so he knows where he is at all times. But, this really is an unbelievable garden. This is their front yard. This is in their front yard. And you can see during COVID, this was the front yard, or the vegetable garden was a meeting place to talk to your neighbors from, 6 feet or more away, right? And so I think it's really important, and they really experimented, and they made mistakes. And I think that's the important thing of gardening. We all make mistakes, but gosh, they're beautiful mistakes sometimes, right? And so you look at this tone on tone and silver on silver, how unique this is, but it's all gravel, right? There's not a lick of grass here. Portland has really turned into this Mediterranean climate where they go through extreme long areas of drought. And so instead, why fight it? Let's go with it, right? And so these roots are protected underneath this gravel. They tap down into the subsoil. And so these olive trees have doubled in size since we shot this. And really unbelievable. Vignettes. This is something that we saw a lot. Is we love to set the stage. We love to set the tone for our garden. And Erin Shannon, the Impatient Gardener, does anyone follow Erin on YouTube? She has a fantastic YouTube channel. She's wonderful. She's from just outside Milwaukee, Wisconsin. She lives right on Lake Michigan. It's hard to tell in this next photo, you can see just behind that red barn there is the lake. So she's dealing with harsh conditions, very, very cold conditions. A lot of deer, we all have deer, right? And so, she takes it in a very different mindset. It's a very much more a Great Dixter style garden where she's planting out a lot every year. She's starting a lot of things from seed and from tuber. And so this really intensive area of this 30 by 10 area, she really gardens it up very, very intensely. And so she also experiments with, she has helpers. Yes, we all do. But she experiments with container designs as well, where she really has these specimens that are around the garden and really do set the tone. And she can change up seasonally. When I shot this garden, it was just after Labor Day. And this is a window box. It's hard to tell, but it was like eating the house. It was amazing. I love it. I love excess, and this was a maximal. It was overloaded, right? It was amazing. But you can see how she really used texture. She used flower. It's much more than flower to me, and I think that's really important. You can see here her vegetable garden as well. She has a lot of deer, so it's behind I think it is an actual 8-foot tall, maybe 6-foot tall fence. But how she used the trough container, repurposing, right, with the lotus there in the middle of the flower. But when I got home, I planted a lot of purple basil. This is a purple basil you can start from seed, and how amazing that texture is. That peach of that dahlia would not look as good if that purple basil wasn't there, right? And exactly. Contrast was so key to making the greens look better, the peach look better, the whites look better. And I think that's really a key takeaway. And you can see Allison and Erin on the porch here. But keep in mind, Erin's day job, she's the editor of Sailing Magazine. She's not a full-time gardener. This is her second thing, her second passion. And so she also has a fantastic YouTube channel where she shares her failures and her successes. So please watch it. She's amazing and very funny. John Karloftis in Lexington, Kentucky, comes at it from a very different perspective. John is the consummate Southern entertainer, I would say. He's a fantastic individual, but what he really loves to do is use antiquity and statuary to set the tone throughout his garden. His garden has many rooms, and I've had many evenings sipping an old-fashioned walking around the garden here. I don't drink that much, but when I'm wandering a garden, there's definitely a cocktail in hand, and it's in bourbon country. It is the heart of bourbon country, so you have to. But just how John sets the tone of these stairs, how welcoming that is. It's not for everybody. Not everybody can do this, but just the little learnings of how he welcomes you, and it's such a Southern thing, right? And he also has one of the best pools I've ever been in my life, too. And this was the carriage house that is now an Airbnb. So if you're down at Keeneland for the horse races, look it up. It's not the cheapest one out there, but it's probably one of the best ones. I will say that. But it really how he guides you throughout the garden and really takes you down these alleys and these pathways. And I think, adding mystery into a garden is a very key thing, not being able to see it all at one time and these pathways that meander around. He's also great at this tone on tone. Here it's just a white theme, and you can see this Gara hanging out of this. This was August. It was 90 degrees at 8 o'clock at night, and just how beautiful this is. Of just, this can take a lot of heat, a lot of sun, and it can miss a watering and be fine. And with these obelisk and these English lead planters here, just how great that looks. But he does have a lot of really beautiful. Native perennials as well. This is Henry Ealer Rudbeckia here that is really adding to the ecosystem, what's going on in his garden. And, he doesn't shy away from, what happened on this site. There were slaves that were kept on this homestead in years prior. And so this is the slave quarters that is kept on site to pay homage to that. And the vegetable garden is sited in front of it as well. One of the most photogenic people I've ever photographed in my entire life. He made my job super easy. This is Keith Robinson, and Keith is outside of Atlanta. And I spoke in Atlanta last week, and Keith came from a very different world. He started in this world, then he went into become one of the biggest event planners in all of Atlanta, and worked with the biggest of names you could think of in Atlanta. And so when he retired, he had enough. He's like, I need to get out of this. He had all these props that he had used in his 20 plus years of setting the stage through different events. And so in his home, he uses that. He stages these areas to really produce a beautiful garden. Again, it was so hard to get a good photo of him. I probably have 300 photos of Keith like this. And this was just a sunny Saturday morning in May. I think Keith was the second or third garden we shot, and he made my job very easy. The boxwoods that are on site have been documented back to the late 1800s and have persisted there. This is called red vine plantation. And so Keith has, he doesn't own the house or the plantation, but he has a lifelong lease to live there and caretake it as long as he chooses to. But what Keith does is he's so resourceful at restaging and repurposing. This gazebo was the front porch rails of a house that was being demoed in Atlanta. The tin roof came off a roof that was about ready to be demoed. So he just backs the truck up and loads it up, because if not, it's just going to the trash. And so, but he's also a fantastic plantsman, and how he stages these key components, these key statuaries throughout the garden is really beautiful. Keep in mind, this is the American garden, right? This is who we are as a people. And you look at these strawberry planters that they don't need to be planted. You don't need anything in them, and how they echo that color throughout that space is really special. This is one of my favorite. We all have these piles of things, behind the shed, and this was the one. I don't think he thought I would take a picture of this, but just the tobacco stakes that are used for staking, and the harvest baskets and everything. It's just one of my favorite moments. But from cloches to these terracotta pots staged around, really, really special. He's traveled a lot though too, and so this European influence of pleached sycamores and the parterre of the boxwoods is really important. And so in a southern home, they would plant a large tree outside for the shade, because there was no air conditioning, and the summers would be unbearable. So the ladies of the house would go out and sit underneath the magnolia tree. It's hard to tell, but this tree is about, I would say, 100 feet from tip to tip. And so those lanterns are 4 feet tall, hanging from that tree, just for scale. And so, yeah, you can't plan for that. You have to plan 100 years in advance to create something like that, right? But that moment of taking the risk of staging that, and it's so beautiful, these vignettes that you find throughout the space. The bowl here was something he was mowing over for a long time, and found it in the back 40 and dug it up, right? Sometimes you fall into luck, and Keith dug it out and just it became this center point of this beautiful little garden outside the screen porch. He also has a great eye for just putting the right thing in the right place, thing in the right place. And this was a French white oak bathtub planted with 30 digitalis that, it might be there for a couple weeks, but man, it's gorgeous, right? So Beauty and the Imperfect. And it's not the person that's imperfect, it was her situation. And so this is Jeanette Bell, and this is the Garden District of New Orleans. And this area was very strongly hit by Katrina. And so, it was obviously a once in a century, we hope, once in a century storm, but really decimated this entire community. And so this little plot of land that she has, it's what she gives back to her community through harvesting these bouquets and making these beautiful centerpieces. She's using things that a lot of us would get rid of, our nursery tubs and those sorts of things. The mustard seeds that have gone to flower, the liatris that's going. And one of the most innovative things I saw on my entire trip to hit on another strawberry planter was this. Everyone has this trash can, right? And how beautiful and simple that is, right? And she also has a fantastic rose collection, which she's collected over a number of years and has them all documented. And so just this little gem that gives back so much to this community. While we were there, people were yelling in, waving to her, saying hi. And it really was a very special moment. This haphazard moment of this liatris and this colocasia here. No one would think to do this unless it happened, right? And here she is holding court up front. So people save her little wine bottles for her, and she'll fill these and deliver them to her for their dinner parties. And she's really innovative and really an amazing person. And it's just, I think the juxtaposition of the fence with the softness of this planting is great. And again, she made my job super easy photographing. This was the first garden we visited, and we didn't know what we were getting into. And after we shot that garden, we knew that was it. We were hitting the ground running, and it was amazing. It was energizing for sure. Rewilding. I think rewilding is one of those terms that is kind of like sustainability was 10 years ago. Some people love it, some people hate it. And I think there's certainly a balance of what needs to happen. Ben Vost in Nebraska, he is flying in the face of every HOA. He's doing what I call guerrilla gardening, and he's not afraid to say it. And so he calls lawn a weed, and I don't disagree with them, right? It wasn't here. It's a European import. And so this is his front yard. This is his community where he does this gardening. There's no one who has his back. There is no one who has his back. Now, since then, it's changed. It has changed. But he's it's Prairie Up, right? He has a great book out right now as well. You can look up Ben. But if you need the blueprint of how to do this, he's got it for you. And these are, Nebraskan prairie plants. They're going through an extreme drought right now. I mean, we're talking a 10-year drought. But his garden is thriving. And so what does that say? We need to change our mentality. We need to change how we garden with our greater landscape, right? From these beautiful perennials and the amount of wildlife and the amount of insect life that he brings. He's creating this food island for all these migratory insects and birds that need these specific foods, right? But he's created these islands for that to happen. And he's documented a lot. If you follow him on Instagram, he can be very harsh to the point sometimes, but I think we need that. Honestly, I think we need that because we need to shake up what's going on here. Seconic Gardens in Little Compton, Rhode Island. Anyone been to Seconic Gardens at all? Okay, you guys have to go. They have a plant fair coming up. They have a lecture series coming up very, very soon as well. And it's now you can visit the garden through open days, but you can also schedule a stay or visit there. It's a fantastic area. Again, just loop into a visit to Newport, Rhode Island. Go see the breakers or something. But you want to see innovative garden design. Johnny and Michael here. So, they come from this from a very different perspective. Johnny designed the exhibits at the Bronx Zoo. He was a landscape architect there. And Michael was Ralph Lauren's right-hand man. And so you look at, so they would drive up on the weekend from New York City. I think it was about a 4-hour drive. They pick up plants the entire way. They make their schedule of things they're doing over the course of the weekend. This was Johnny's mom's house. And when she passed away, they moved there I think a while after she passed away, but they moved there full time within the past 10 years. And so they're well-traveled. They're so smart as a whip, and they're passionate about plants. So this was a garden that was invasive rose and honeysuckle. And so they're on this very important migratory path for birds down the East Coast. And so their whole goal was, this is called Pollinator Plus. And the idea is that they want a hole in every leaf of this garden because it's more than just them. It's to give back to what's going on. And gosh, you see how beautiful this is. It's hard to get the scale. I'm on a 17-foot tall orchard ladder shooting this year. There's pathways and these decks that go through all of this. These plants are up over your head. Oh, did I just lose it? Oh, there we go. I'm back. These plants are up over your head, and it's amazing. You're like hiking through the jungle, and they have the coolest pollinator house I've ever seen before in my life. Obviously, they both have a fantastic design eye, but in their house, I mean, come on, it's like the quintessential cedar shake salt box, right? I don't know. There are a number of them close, but I don't know if you could. There's a spot. There's a bunk in there. You can stay in there. And I told them I'm going to come and work in the garden for a week and stay, and they said okay. But everything needs to match, right? From the geraniums in the front door, and and Michael's hat. And the reason Michael has his hat is so Johnny can find him in the garden. So there's a good takeaway there. But the rewilding, this field's not theirs. It's a farm that really butts right up to their property, but it's so important to how it plays in relationship to what they're doing. So they cut a pathway, and these hollies are planted here to frame this area. And gosh, those chess pieces really make that entrance, right? It's cut twice a year, and you can see how beautiful this is and how much this is giving back to the greater good of what's going on around them. And they're really influential people in the plant world. They're good friends with Fergus Garrett from Great Dixter, and but that's one part of their garden. There's 30 rooms to visit in this garden on 2 acres. Book a visit. You need to go. It's unbelievable. And they've built it all by hand, predominantly their hands. And it's through these mazes of pathways and boardwalks. But there are palm trees and bananas that live outside year-round. And through this microclimate they've created. You need to get there. You need to talk to them about what they're doing. And they're kind of savants, I would say, of the plant world. This is what they call their electric garden. They say they have to plug it in at night, and their meter just goes around and around and around. So one of the coolest people I've ever met before in my life, John Holm. So John has a very diverse background. He's a Norwegian, came here, studied the culinary arts. He became one of the top chefs in New York City. Was a teacher at the Culinary Institute as well. But then decided he didn't want to do that. He didn't want to work the weekends and nights. So he went to the Brooklyn Botanic Gardens professional student career path. He went through the program there and then became Martha Stewart's head gardener for a number of years. And so what he does and how he thinks and about the symbiotic relationship between plant and home and the environment is so key. Oh, and that's Heidi right there. Heidi has a brother named Bjorn, and she is the cutest little thing you'd ever want to follow you around a garden. And so it's through this innovative use of stone, of chess pieces of plants, how everything has its place, but it looks effortless. John decided to rip out his backyard and put in a meadow. And so this is a prairie dropseed meadow. And he planted it by plug. The grass paths here are buffalo grass. They need cut like twice a year. They don't grow. It's a smaller dwarf grass. But gosh, look at the house. And look, another theme that we found are these dark homes and how they become these amazing backdrops to the green plant palette. I should also say that John's husband, Harry, teaches at RISD. He's an industrial designer, and he's got a pretty good partner in crime. But Harry doesn't. He does get out there, but not like John does. You can see the scree garden here and how they use this rockery and their conifer collection as well. So I should say as well, when we shot these gardens, it was one evening and one morning. That is it. This is a moment in time. These gardens have changed since then. These gardens have evolved since then in a good way. There has been a garden that's been sold since we shot this book. And so you have to think about that. These were people who were willing and ready to open up their gardens to us during COVID. I'm invading their space. Yes, a number of them were friends. Some of them I literally direct message on Instagram and say, hey, I want to come shoot your garden. And now we're fast friends since then. But so you have to think about that. It's one morning, one evening. And so we lucked out. I would say we lucked out in general. And so there was a pine tree that was here in the back corner of their garden that blew over in one of the hurricanes. And so Harry, being an amazing industrial designer, they sent it to upstate New York to one of their friends who had like a laser sawmill. And so they created this obelisk here and welded this stainless steel base so it could be re-erected in its spot again. And it's just a different way of thinking. You can see how it all plays together. But gosh, who doesn't want this meadow in their backyard? It's unbelievable. And so the Native Americans would say the prairies would come alive with scent in September. And it wasn't a flower. It's this grass that a lot of people think smells like buttered popcorn. It is infectious, and it is really unbelievable. So this not only gives back to that as beauty, but also the scent and also ground dwelling, the mason bees that we really need to protect love to burrow into the ground underneath these as well. So there are some things that we saw along the way. 3 plants we saw in every region of the country. And so it was agave americana. Up north, they were in containers. They were brought inside a lot of times. Down south, they were planted outside. Amsonia hubretii, which is an unbelievable American native plant. It's so soft. It's so textural. And then Chasmanthium latifolium. In some areas of the country, it is invasive. But for us in the Midwest, it's not. It doesn't move around. But we did see it everywhere. In some areas, it was invasive. Some areas just used it as a staple plant. So the result of inspiration is my garden. So this is my daughter, Charlotte. And so the whole goal for my garden was to be the proving grounds, right? It's the same mentality of everyone that we shot throughout this book. Follow no rules that anyone sets out for me, and really just push the envelope of design. So we built our house 8 years ago. We've been in the house 8 years. So I really wanted to create this garden that was underneath trees, a living umbrella, so to speak, because we really live outdoors a lot in the summertime as well. So we wanted to create this extended living area. So these are hornbeams that are planted in the gravel. These are, this is a little insight. Most people don't know this. This is Carpinus betulus pendula. So they're not an upright tree. They're meant to weep, but I don't let them weep. I prune them so they can't weep. So there you go, a little bit of insight. But the idea is this layer upon layer perennial color that exists throughout the course of the season. And so this is May, this is July. So you see how that evolves. It's the same area. I didn't rip the plants out. It's just what comes into favor at that time of year. I cut back the salvias, the alliums come up. This is bootlua grass here in the background. Mosquito grass is called, another amazing native. Also keep in mind, I don't irrigate. None of this is irrigated. And so you see these Mediterranean style plants that really get this reflective heat off the back of our house. It is the most brutal conditions when it doesn't rain. And so you think about how we garden and what we're gardening for. I don't garden to go pull a hose and water all the time. I garden for the beauty of what's out there. I garden to give back to the bees. I garden to give back to all the wildlife that come through our garden. We also use our garden as a photo studio. Country Casual Teak, another amazing company here in the DC area, had a photo shoot in our back garden as well. So we're very fortunate to have been able to do some amazing things in this garden. But it's the bulb layer as well. It's the bulbs, it's the perennials, it's how they play, it's how the light catches it, right? This is also my photo studio. It's my muse because I always have, my camera with me. We all do, right? And so this is my journal. This is what I'm documenting the garden with. I know when things are blooming because I can just look back on my pictures and find the date, right? So it's intermixing those textures. This is that same border. This is early in the spring. This is midsummer. You can see how that texture changes. This is my backdoor commute. Every day I come through this little area. And so I studied garden design in England. And so to me, dividing things out into rooms was very, very important, having the hedge work to create the spaces. But I can't grow yews and taxus like we do. The deer will just annihilate them. It would be an uphill battle. So these are Western arborvitaes. These are arborvitaes that I trained into a hedge. And I've trained them to an exact height. I hedge them at 11 feet. Exactly, I use a laser level to get them just perfect. And I will say my crews don't come to my house. This is my therapy. This is the place I garden. And so I also let it evolve, right? This garden is ever changing. This mullein had blown in. I let it do its thing. And so it's kind of taking over there for a section of the garden for the hot summers. But my favorite perennial is the Calamantha Montrose White. You can see the white perennial right there. It blooms from July until freeze. And I'm not saying frost. I'm saying freeze. It's really one of the best perennials that's out there. I can't recommend it enough. But I let things evolve. And this is, organized chaos is what I say I do. It's Midwest Modern is organized chaos. And the Midwest Modern aspect is to organizing things to the way that using hard lines, hard stops, having these chess pieces throughout, but also letting the chaos take place throughout. And this is one of those images that I really love. It is the chaotic nature of a summer garden, and I embrace it. You can see how the grasses, I have my Sporobolus meadow that kind of envelops the garden at the one end. It smells like popcorn in September. As it evolves, I love the beauty of decay as well, embracing what's happening out there in the garden. And gosh, has life come back in droves. It's the amount of life that we have in our garden, from monarchs to swallowtails to every bird you can imagine. And we're on a major migratory path as well. And so we're very fortunate to be able to give back. This is Picmanthemum unicum. So it's mountain mint. This needs some room. I will say that. And it has its own area of the garden. But on this little spot, there's probably 30,000 honeybees at that moment. And I could walk through there and just put my hands over top of all of them, and they don't sting me because they're so drunk on pollen. This plant gives so much back and is a plant that really we need a lot more on our ditches and highways and wherever, right? Why not? Why are we mowing our ditches and highways? What are we doing? This is where we need these things. So Monarda bradburyana in this grass mix, but I love gardening with the void of color, right? But silver is a color to me, right? I love the airiness of the smoke bush in the background, the Rudbeckia maxima, the mullein there in the foreground. It's really a texture forward. It looks like a black and white photo. I know it's certainly not. And here as well, you can see the seed heads of the prairie drop seed with the Calamantha montrose white, the Veronicastrum in the background, the Rudbeckia maxima, all things I barely have to touch over the course of the season. I'm a gardener, but I don't always have a lot of time to garden. I wrote a book instead. There's also a lot of great alliums out there that are being developed by American breeders. Brent Horvath from Intrinsic Nurseries outside of Chicago, fantastic plant breeder. A lot of times you deal with a cultivar or what's called what I call a nativar. It's a native plant that has been bred for beauty. A lot of times those assets go away. The pollen goes away. It doesn't give back as much. Well, he's got plants that really give back a lot as well. Here's the front of my garden. It really needs to hold its own. It's really a balance of texture and different plants that really hold their own. Because I just don't have time to deal with the garden a lot of times. I'm driving kids to hockey practice instead. The Core 10 metal here, it's a 12-inch tall piece of Core 10 metal. It's retaining the bed as well. I love using metal. We live in the Rust Belt. I embrace it. I love it. Again, the Calamantha, the Artemisia valerifernis here. Also, there's a QR code out there. Our plant list is in our book, but there's a QR code out there. You can scan it and get the plant list from our entire garden. Every cultivar to the exact species are down there. So feel free to take that information and use it. I love the beauty of decay. I love how things age throughout the course of the season. And Allison, being a super creative person, she kills me. She hates it that this photo's in here. It's just like, what was I even doing? She has a little section of the garden. She's not a gardener. She's a finance background from Indiana University. It's what makes us work well together. But gosh, she's so creative when it comes to flower arranging. These are bouquets she created from our garden, right? These are the bounty of what we were able to produce through perennials. She's allowed to cut anything from my garden. I beg her not to, but she does anyways. But she's not afraid to make mistakes. She does things that I would never do, growing from seed, and she does a fantastic job. I'm also really experimenting with what I call living mulch. This is a chewing fescue, so things that would be in a pasture for sheep. And so instead of manicuring these areas, I'm creating these defined mow lines, right? I'm mowing a lot less. I'm bringing the edge lines in. And so we were talking about turkeys up top earlier. I have a gaggle of 9 turkeys that come through every spring, a mom. And so they come through and they start, when they first come, I can't see them because the grass is too tall. By the time, end of the season, they're up well over the grass. But the reason they come is because they have habitat, right? They have things to eat. Turkeys eat ticks. You guys know that? Yeah. That's amazing. It's unbelievable. So bring on the turkeys. This is a garden that I call chop and drop. I mow it down with my mower in the highest setting, and I don't do much to it the rest of the year. I'll get rid of bad invasive weeds like Canadian thistle if need be, but outside that, I really don't do much. I let the debris from the plant drop. It's its own mulch, and then I just let it go. This was also, the tub was from my Philadelphia Flower Show garden. I decided to take it home because why not? It's my garden. So So we also have a black portion of our home that was specifically meant to be a backdrop to the garden and to the textures going on as well. Container design is obviously makes it hugely into our garden, from core 10 planters to the Willie Gould planters that we found that came over from Paris, right? And so this tone on tone is something I really love. My staghorn, it's probably about 6 feet across now, honestly, and it takes a full-size truck to move that sucker, and a couple guys that get underneath of it. But this planter, we were in Wisconsin. I was speaking in Minnesota. We were driving home. We did the quintessential summer road trip, and the kids were in the back, and I'm driving. We're on a detour. I was hoping to get home by like 1 a.m. We hit a thunderstorm. That wasn't going to happen. So we're driving along, and I'm going like 60 miles an hour, and there's a plane in someone's front yard. I'm like, what was that? So I slow down, turn around, and I go up to this front porch that was like certainly a collector's or a junker's site. And it says, if you want to buy something, call Mike. And so I called Mike, and this planter was right underneath the sign on the front porch. So I bought it for $100 maybe. Luggage is riding in the cab. We're just like overloaded with things. But this container has really developed its own personality over the course of the year. We really did want to change it up from growing things to things that aren't growing. And, we throw the antlers in there, whatever. So on a trip to Longwood Gardens, I was really inspired by this part of the conservatory that was all silver. And so I really love purely designing with silver only and texture only. And so, yeah, we did it. Summer 2021, we crisscrossed the country. And so American Roots was the COVID baby for us, so to speak. And thank you so much for coming out tonight. I hope you enjoy the book. And you can scan this and follow me on Instagram. You get to see what I'm doing at any given moment. So sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. Who knows? So, yeah, thank you. We have time for questions. There's a microphone that will be coming around. So raise your hand, and then a microphone will come to you.
Oh, I need no microphone. Oh, that's right. Thank you so much, Nick. Can you talk a little bit about how you chose the gardens or the gardeners?
Yeah, I mean, it's always my friend Julie Freeman. It's always the first question we get, right? And again, this could have been 50 gardeners. This could have been 100 gardeners, and maybe it will be. I mean, I think if we pitched another book to Timber, they would let us do the second round of it. It was the moment in time, right? We had a very tight deadline. So I had about 10 in my pocket I knew we were going to do right off the bat. And then it was really regionality. So we wanted to spread the region out. We completely missed the Mountain West. I admit it. We know it. I've got emails about it. And we are sorry. But it was really that place and time where we didn't have a garden we knew of. We didn't have a friend we knew of. And so a lot of that was... Keith Robinson was an example. I've been reading about Keith in Veranda magazine for 10 years, and he was a contributor on there for a number of years. And so it was really important. So even though, it was also important that it wasn't overly published. We wanted authentically new gardens and gardeners to be in there. Yeah, Keith was in Veranda, but it was of a very specific container that he was doing that week, right? So it was people we admired, people we were friends with, and they had to fit in our timeline. So... yeah, that's really what it was. Yes, back here. Got a microphone coming to you.
I want you to talk about espalier.
Yeah.
Apple trees.
Espalier apples are, it's...
One variety better than another?
Oh, always, yeah. Well, I don't know. I think there's certainly a number that we really like to use. You can get it from Honeycrisp to Granny Smith, right? There's only a couple places that really start them in the country, and one's I think it's Rivers Road Farm in Tennessee, and then there's one Bountiful Farms in Oregon. And so we've been very fortunate. We can get them. It's I think the biggest thing that if on that one slide you can see those are on guide wires, so it's very important to keep the form of it very true. And so the biggest thing with any orchard is a lot of spur pruning to make sure you really keep the in check. And the reason espalier was developed is because in northern European countries, they couldn't ripen fruit. They didn't have enough days. They didn't have enough for a full-size tree. So this was allow the sunlight to get into these trees to develop these fruits. A smaller scale, certainly, but a lot of orchards operate on this like this now. A much skinnier tree, a much more manageable tree that you don't have to climb to get the fruit off of as well. And it also allows you, if you wanted to, you could tent, you could, to keep your fruit more intact. It's a much smaller scale, and really is great for a small space, small gardening. So in that case, we have stainless steel guide wires that we then tie to. We guide them up. So yeah, the candelabra shape, which is the kind of up. They started at 3 feet tall, and we trained them to 11 feet. And that's just by, diligent horticultural practices.
Length of time?
Yeah, that 5 years, about 5 years in that case. Yeah, good question. Thank you.
I'm going to jump in with a question from Zoom.
Yes, Zoom question.
Somebody asked, when your clients are considering garden design, how much does maintenance play into their decisions?
Yeah, I think it holistically has to be taken into account from the very beginning. Why would you invest in a garden and not think about the longevity of what it's going to be? And that's why some of these very perennial forward gardens are very appealing, because the way my mentality of gardening is really much on the same lines of the more you plant, the less space there is for weeds to come in. And the more intensely you plant from the very beginning, the less work it is long term. Yeah, that first year, it's a lot of work. You have to keep it watered. You have to wait till things get rooted in. But to me, the more plants that are more suited for the better condition, the better. So, yeah, clients certainly. A lot of our clients start as maintenance clients, and then we go into the design phase of it and redo a garden because we've been there doing maintenance. We have 2 clients we're working with right now that are that exact circumstance. We've been maintaining for a number of years. They put a pool in, they add a garage or whatever, and then we're there to reimagine what the garden is as well. And so, yeah, we think of maintenance right off the bat. Even though we're a maintenance company, I don't enjoy just selling gobs and gobs of maintenance. I want to plant a design that gives back a lot with a lower input. It's harder and harder to get employees, right? It's our biggest challenge. So having gardens that sustain themselves with less frequent visits is very important to us.
We have time for 2 more in-person questions.
You didn't talk much about fragrance in the garden, which I think is huge.
I only had so much time. Yeah, I didn't talk much about fragrance. It's so important in what I do. It's a lot of these perennials have such a, we look at a catalog, we design that way, but fragrance is so key. It's such a maybe one of the most important sensory. I still can think back to my grandma's front garden, and she had the Mr. Lincoln rose. I can still smell that rose, and if I catch a whiff of it, if I'm in a botanic garden or whatever, it takes me instantly back to that time, right? So, yeah, that sensory aspect of touch, smell is so key. That's why I use so many soft plants too. I walk into a store, I'm touching everything, and I'm the same way with plants. So.
Hi, thanks so much for great information
Thank you.
and humor and beauty.
Yeah, thanks.
You didn't mention anything about insects.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, are there certain plants that repel mosquitoes? There's a lot of mosquitoes in this area.
Yeah, there are a lot of mosquitoes.
And, plants that you want to attract certain insects, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And
Well, I would say in general, our plant palette is really geared towards a pollinator-friendly garden. From the alliums to the calamentha, the Montrose white is really, you're talking feeds hundreds and hundreds and probably thousands of bees on a daily basis. So really, as designers, as gardeners, we have such a major impact on our local ecosystem, right? If you add up all the spaces that we have together through these gardens where they can link from these food islands to these food islands is so crucial in stringing this thing back together, right? Of really creating this larger, greater good ecosystem. So, and as far as repelling mosquitoes, there are certainly a lot of plants out there that we use. A lot of geraniums repel. One of my favorite perennials is geranium macrorhizum, big root geranium. Has a fantastic scent. Repels a lot of mosquitoes. Kind of smells like citronella as well. Lemongrass as well, if you put that in a container, is a great deterrent. And a lot of sages as well repel mosquitoes. So yeah, it's we certainly are very wildlife forward when it comes to planting design. Thanks. Good question. Yeah, I can take 10 more. I don't. We have a timeline. I don't.
I love the look of all the pea gravel that
Yeah,
you have
thank you.
throughout.
Yeah.
But if you have a shade garden in back and you want to use some kind of gravel, as far as maintenance or moss or anything that grows on
Yeah.
it, like what do you do if you want the look of that? Do you have some shade?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly have a fair amount of shade when we plant these, and I expect shade long term when we're planting trees into these gravel gardens, and so I think it is certainly I would say the gravel works wonderful. The first time I ever saw a gravel garden was in Normandy, and it was in this shade garden that she had this amazing sitting area, and it was, again, I was having a cocktail, walking the garden, and but it was an area that she couldn't get some things to grow, so she used this gravel. She created a seeding area, and then she planted these, really sturdy perennials, and she mulched up to the crowns of these. I think it was Summon Substance Hosta, if I remember correctly. And so, yeah, it really works hand in hand. I think the biggest thing is it's very easy gravel selection is very key. The gravel I use is a very fine gravel. In our garden, we have a very sunny spot, though. If you're using in a more leafy area, something like a pea gravel, the biggest thing is it needs to be an angular gravel. If not, it will roll under your foot. If you think about two marbles side by side, they're never going to kind of settle in. So that having the angular gravel or a crushed, we use a 60% crushed gravel, it's called, is really key. And then you can keep it very tidy. Now I love moss, so that doesn't really deter me. But a great way to get rid of moss, a little trade secret and very eco-friendly, is baking soda. Yeah. So that's a. Oh no, just sprinkle it on, and just wash it in. So yeah. So there you go. So that's what I recommend.
Thank you so much for an amazing lecture.
Thank you.